Good morning, everyone. Let's talk magnetized collisionless shock formation mediated by the modified two-stream instability. This is Victor, from University of Rochester. Magnetized collisionless shocks are omnipresent in our universe. Laser facilities provide a controllable way to study them in laboratories. In this talk, I will show that a laboratory-achievable perpendicular magnetized collisionless shock is mediated by an instability called modified two-stream instability, or MTSI. On the left-hand side, I am plotting the ion velocity phase space from our kinetic simulations. The horizontal axis is the spatial x, or the shock normal direction. The vertical axis is the ion velocity in the x direction. The upper prong of this tuning fork shape is the incoming ion, and the lower prong is the shock-reflected ion. These two ion species interact with each other in the presence of an external B field. This interaction is MTSI. On the right-hand side, it is the Fourier spectrum of the EX field. In this plot, you can see two non-zero modes. As will be discussed in detail shortly, both of them result from MTSI in the shock transition region, labeled by 1 and 2 in the two plots. This is one of the most convincing evidences that MTSI is the operating instability for the shock. In this talk, I will show our kinetic simulation results on perpendicular magnetized collisionless shocks mediated by MTSI. First, a supercritical shock can be readily formed on terawatt laser systems like omega EP, if we choose parameters carefully that allow the instability to sufficiently grow. Second, mode analysis indicates that a modified two-stream instability, or MTSI, provides the main dissipation for shock formation. Third, the growth rate of MTSI is much larger than the ion gyrofrequency when we use realistic physical parameters. And realistic parameters, like ion-electron mass ratio, can substantially separate the shock formation time from the ion gyroperiod. Last but not least, in a supercritical shock, those shock-reflected ions will gyrate in the upstream region and then participate in shock front reformation. I'd like to thank my collaborators at the Laboratory for Laser Energetics and UCLAIST Osiris Consortium for the use of the code. There are multiple ways to study collisionless shocks. Before high-power lasers, in nature, these shocks are usually studied by telescope images, spacecraft missions, etc. These activities, however, are all somehow restrictive. Nowadays, laser experiments, combined with computational simulations, provide a controllable way of study. I listed a few examples here. The first image is a bow shock near the center of our galaxy, the second is the International Sun-Earth Explorer program started from 70s, the third is an omega EP counterpropagating plasma plumes experiment. The last one is a quasi-1D particle in cell piston-driven shock simulation. In our work, the left-hand side cartoon is the experimental schematic. Hydrogen or neon gas is injected to the target chamber and is ionized by X-rays from the laser piston interaction, forming an ambient plasma. Under an external B field applied by the MIFT's coil, the ambient plasma is pushed by the laser-driven piston when the drive laser illuminates the solid foil target. Finally, a collisionless shock can form and detach from the piston. In the simulations, on the right-hand side, we use a fixed reflecting wall to replace the piston, which can bring a clear downstream, free of the influence from the piston. The ambient plasma drifts to the right, hits the wall and forms a shock. The simulation is in the rest frame of the wall, or, in other words, the ideal piston. The transformation between the lab frame and piston frame simply follows this equation. As we mentioned earlier, the modified two-stream instability provides dissipation for the shock. Here is the dispersion relation of MTSI, from which we could numerically solve for its growth rate. To allow sufficient instability growth, we find that the maximum growth rate is basically a function of the shock sonic Mach number within the parameter range of interest. For hydrogen, Mach 4 can almost reach the plateau of the growth rate, while neon is insensitive to the Mach number. On the right axis, the growth rates normalized by two ion gyrofrequencies, we could see that the growth rates of MTSI are much larger than the ion gyrofrequencies. Therefore, the shock can readily form within an ion gyroperiod, or, if you take a look at the left axis, the growth rate over B in physical units, the shock can form within a few tenths of a nanosecond under a B field around 50 Tesla. There is one thing needed attention: most kinetic simulations used reduced ion mass, unrealistically high B field, or reduced speed of light to save computational resources. These compromises may alter the relative importance of different instabilities. That's why we emphasize realistic parameters, so that we could build a more comprehensive understanding among different physical processes. Here in this slide, I am showing the hydrogen shock. On the left-hand side, it is a snapshot of 2D density map at 0.1 TCI. Again, TCI is the upstream ion gyroperiod. The Y-averaged density and B field are also plotted in dashed lines. In the upstream region, we could observe a population of reflected ions, which is the signature of supercritical shocks. On the right-hand side, it is the temporal evolution of 1D density profile. The shock velocity is about 1.61 times of the piston velocity. We could also see a shadow before the shock front, which are those reflected ions. Also, Weibel filaments are not seen in both of these plots. This is because Weibel instability is suppressed by the strong external B field. For supercritical shocks, it is very important to know how the ions are reflected. On the left-hand side, you can see a strong X field at the shock front, building a potential wall over 2000 electronvolts. The low-energy tail of the Maxwellian incoming ion is reflected to a speed up to twice the shock velocity, which can be seen on the right-hand plot. To determine the operating instability, we did a mode analysis here in this slide. The upper left is the Fourier spectrum of X. Two clear non-zero modes, 0.33 and 0.86 omega PE/c, are observed. So where do they come from? In the right column, in the Vx phase space plot, which has been shown a few times already, if we pick two locations in the shock transition region, marked by the blue line and the red box, the velocity distributions are extracted in the second row. If we fit them with bi-Maxwellian distributions, and plug into the dispersion relation of MTSI, we could obtain two modes with maximum growth rates, 0.33 and 1 omega PE/c, which are close enough to what we have in the spectrum. Another evidence is the Ex fluctuation level, plotted in the lower left corner. The fluctuation of X normalized by its upstream value is well described by the growth rate of MTSI. Therefore, we could draw a conclusion that MTSI indeed provides dissipation for the shock. The reflected ions are not only accelerated by the Ex field in the shock normal direction. In the tangential direction, these ions are co-accelerated by the motional Ez field to an average energy of 8 keV. The ion reflection is the first step of shock front reformation at later times. To show the dynamic of the shock front reformation, we performed a longer time 1D simulation. In this temporal evolution of density profile, 3 clear reformation periods are seen, indicated by the arrows. The reformation happens on the length scale of an ion gyro radius, with a period of 0.55 ion gyro period. The Rankine-Hugoniot jump conditions are satisfied for a portion of the duration in each reformation period, which is marked by the white dashed segments. That's all I have to say. I am leaving you with my summaries again. Thank you. I'll take questions from here.